One of the messages that Billy Donovan had after the Bulls win against the Pistons was that Matas Buzelis hasn't arrived yet, and there's still a lot of things that he needs to work on before we can say that he's arrived. I want to talk a little bit about today. I want to dive deeper into that thought, so we're going to start there. I also talk about Josh Giddey and the strength that he found here with the Chicago Bulls that wasn't in OKC, and how that's going to be drastically important for this team this year. And lastly, we're going to look at my biggest concern for the Chicago Bulls as a team coming out of their win against the Detroit Pistons. We're going to get to all that and more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go and get into this content today, y'all. And I want to talk about the quote from Billy Donovan. One of the things Billy Donovan said, and we played the quote on yesterday's episode, was that Matas Buzelis has not arrived yet, right? And I know that was kind of met with some, several different responses from Bulls fans, and that's perfectly fine. And I think that the journey of where Matas Buzelis is going to get to, the excitement over that journey, has sometimes left people to think that we're already there, right? And I want to be clear, no matter what Matas Buzelis does this season, he's not yet arrived as far as exactly who he can be in this league, right? Matas could average 20 points per game. If he does that in his second year, let's be clear here, that means that the ceiling for him is still extremely higher when you factor in his age, the fact that he's only in his second year, and that's the good part of this, right? There are a lot of questions last season about how Billy Donovan managed Matas Buzelis. And Matas has even admitted that he was a little frustrated, but then he kind of came to understand why Billy Donovan did it the way that he did it as far as Matas's minutes last season. And that's good. That's a level of awareness. And when you look at Matas and how his growth as a player is coming, I think that the part that us being in this part, sometimes we can forget because, again, Bulls fans have been, we haven't had a star that we've built homegrown for a while, right? I mean, and I don't think that that's unfair to say for anyone. But now you look at, for example, just how he's growing as a player. And one of the things last season for Matas Buzelis, and a big thing for him, was he didn't create for himself. Almost 80% of his buckets were assisted. Now, we have one game of data to go off of, so I'm going to give you the number just for fairness, but I want to be clear here. It's one game of data, so take it for what you will. But 71% of his buckets were assisted in the Bulls season opener against Detroit. That's a 9% dip, right? Now, Kobe wasn't there. Kobe's going to have the ball in his hands a little bit more, those type of things. But I'd say this. The fact that Matas has already shown growth as a ball handler in this year, right? Billy Donovan used him a lot more as far as him creating for himself, trying to take players off the dribble, those type of things. And that's an area of his game that is going to continually grow. And as you see that number for Matas, right? And I think as long as he's on a team with Josh Giddey, that assist number is always going to, that assisted number, the number of his buckets that are assisted, are always going to be a bit higher, right? They're always going to be a bit higher. And that's a good thing. It helps put him in a space where he is going to, get easier looks because of the gravity of playing with a passer like Josh Giddey and the up-tempo system that the Bulls run with. And that's going to be an important part of his game, right? I think another part that we've talked a lot about here is Matas growing in the mid-range. Last season, you look at him, 3% of his shots were in the mid-range. 3% of them were. When you had 47% being at either above the break threes and corner threes, and then when you look at the other part of it, about 48% of that was in the paint or in the restricted area, right? And that trend kind of looks like it's the same. Again, one game of data, we don't exactly know, but the mid-range percentage went up to 16%, right? So more balance that you're seeing from Matas Buzelis. Again, one game of data. And I say that to highlight this. At looking at Matas's growth, there's going to be, it's not always linear. Now, I do think some of the better players in the NBA it can be very linear where you're just looking at it and you're like, hey, they went from this to this to this to this over the first 3-4 seasons, whatever, before they maximized on that. And that's going to be perfectly fine. It is what it is there. But I think when you hear people talk about, even in Billy Donovan's quote that we've gone back to, I think it just shows the sign that, hey, this kid's ceiling is extremely high. Vucevic also quote on him after the game, basically saying that he has the same. He said that Matas has the same type of composure and the mental part that you look at as some of the better players in the NBA. Again, another thing that you want to hear from your young player that's growing on your roster. There's no doubt that Matas has all the potential in the world, and that potential is going to be great to see. And I think getting to watch that journey here in a Chicago Bulls uniform is going to be special. And we haven't really had somebody that has that type of potential here for. He's 21 years old. He just turned 21 11 days ago, right? That's how early we are into who Matas is. There are players that were drafted that are older than Matas Buzelis in this past draft, a year after he was drafted. But then when you also look and factor in, like, one of the benchmarks that Matas has set for himself has been he wants to win Most Improved Player, right? We've talked about it. The last player to win Most Improved Player was Monte Ellis in the 2006-7 season. I'm adding 20 years on that. That's crazy. But then when you look at some of the odds, right? DraftKings right now has Matas Buzelis listed as the fourth highest odds to win Most Improved Player. The people that are in front of him are Amin Thompson, Benedict Mathurin, Andrew Nembhard. And when you look at those players, especially Amin Thompson, he's going to be in an amazing place and a role to be in. I have him pegged as one of the candidates to win Defensive Player of the Year. Benedict Mathurin is stepping into, they're hoping that he's going to have this huge leap this season for Ben Mathurin with Tyrese Halliburton being out. He's in, Ben Mathurin's in the starting lineup. That Pacers team just pushed the OKC Thunder to overtime last night, which was a great game where Ben Mathurin had 36 points, right? The competition for Most Improved Player is going to be really interesting this year because you have a number of players that are into roles that, they may be higher up in the pecking order than Matas Buzelis once, Kobe's back and everything goes out. But as I've said before, Matas Buzelis' job is to make it, right? During this stretch while Kobe's out, his job is that when Kobe gets back, Billy Donovan can say, well, hell, maybe 1A, 1B is Kobe and Matas with, Josh Giddey being a player that, is going to still take his shots and still run the offense, but just talk about the scoring priority there. But that's what you have there. Thompson is also one of the top, like I said, as far as, Defensive Player of the Year, but that's it. FanDuel, for example, has Josh Giddy actually listed ahead as Matas Buzelis in the race. They also have Amin Thompson, Ben Mathurin, Nembhard, Josh Giddy, and then Matas Buzelis as well as people were there. And Buzelis is actually tied with Denny Advia, who I think is going to have a lot of opportunity as well. Shaedon Sharpe, and they're both on the Portland Trailblazers also. So this race for Most Improved Player may have more competition in it than what you really looked at. Like, of course, a couple of years ago came down to Tyrese Maxey and Kobe White. That was a fun, when you look at how their seasons went. But as Matas grows, I think the thing that we all, and I think a lot of Bulls fans see this as well, the ceiling for the Bulls grows, right? Because when you have a player that's as young as Matas and as versatile as what Matas is, and that's the thing about Matas is that it seems like right now, because of all the different things he can do with ball handling and shooting the three decently in preseason, didn't make one in the regular season yet, right? His ability to attack the rim, take players off the dribble. Matas can really fit in just about any type of team makeup. And so as he grows and the Bulls become more built around, or he's just factored in more into how they're building things, it gives you a lot of flexibility with your roster. And that's how we're seeing the best teams in the NBA really go right now, right? Is you want flexibility. That way, if you do need to call an audible, if a player becomes available, it doesn't become so much a question of fit, right? Now, you're still going to have that to a degree with any player in the NBA. Even the most versatile player, you still have to worry about fit to a degree, but there's a wider margin there as far as fit. And that's what one of the hopes of Matas Buzelis and what he can become as well for the Bulls is that he's the type of player that's like, okay, cool, we have this fast up-tempo team now, but if Matas grows as a point forward, who's to say that he can't handle the ball in the half court, and then we can surround him with shooters. Maybe we fill our bench with shooters and 3-and-D wings. Like, those type of things are there. So the hope for Matas is one that we all feel, I think, as Bulls fans. There's a smaller community, which I guess I just became aware of, like, after Matas's game. There's like a small portion of Bulls fans that for some reason just don't believe in Matas Buzelis. And I'm still looking at those guys like, what more do you want from this kid? Like, maybe that's just the old man in me, right? Maybe that's just what it is. But watching Matas grow right now is one of the most fun things of the season. Yeah, I have my hopes that the Bulls can be at 500 or above. I have my hopes that and that's rooted in something basketball-wise, right? Yeah, I want to see Noah Essengate. Yeah, I want to see Josh Giddey and Kobe be great, right? All those things, but like just the what Matas offers as far as hope for a franchise that hasn't had a lot of it is palpable. And we just got to hope that it's going to continue to grow because Matas Buzelis is a dog. And he has the right mentality. He has the skill set. Now we just got to see him put it together on the basketball court consistently. And that first game left a lot of people excited. And people are talking about Matas around the NBA. And that usually helps you as well when people take notice of one of your young studs. So let's see what goes in that one. But let's move on from that to Josh Giddey. I want to talk about where Josh Giddey can grow. Like, we know that Josh Giddey, he got better as the game went on against the Detroit Pistons. There were some shaky moments there. It is what it is. It happened. We're not going to act like it didn't. But by the end of the game, Josh Giddey still 11 assists. By the way, he created 28 points off those 11 assists to go along with the 19 points that he scored as well, right? So, like, again, Josh Giddey showing himself to be hugely responsible and organizing that Bulls offense. But when you get into it, he had 11 free throw attempts, right? And I want to talk about that. I came into the season talking about the importance of Josh Giddey getting to the free throw line. Josh Giddey averaged over 3 free throw attempts one time in his NBA career. And that was last season with the Chicago Bulls where he did that, where he averaged 3.2 per game. And that was a pretty nice leap for him, right? When his time with OKC, he never he got there 1.9 times per game, right? That's the highest that he had in 2022-23. So with Josh Giddey, not necessarily being the best shooter. Now, I am glad that Josh Giddey's going to take open threes. We even saw that. He went 1 of 2. If you leave him open, he's going to take it. He's going to have to make defenses. As long as he's hitting them at a decent enough rate, he's going to have to make defenses guard him there, right? But the thing that Josh Giddey that has really added and evolved in this game in his time here in Chicago, and that is because he has the ball in his hands more, is driving to the lane. I talked a little bit about this towards the end of last season. Talked a little bit about it in the off season as well. Before last year with Zach LaVine on the team, he averaged 8.9 drives per game, right? He generated 3.6 points and 4.6 passes off those drives. After the All-Star break, it increased to 16 drives per game, and he got 8.5 points per game doing drives and 7.3 passes, and his field goal percentage went up 4 points with him driving to the bucket more. So when you look at the 19-point, 11-assist game, and 11 free throws that he had as well, he he had 14 drives in that game, right? Which is really good, especially when you look at what he's done for his career, but it's not quite how he finished last season, which, I don't really hold him to that. Those were great numbers, and the Bulls were playing at a different spot, right? But he also had 2 free throw attempts off those drives, which I think he's going to be better than that when it comes down to it. But while Josh Giddey on this team, with Matas Buzelis stepping up, with Kobe White once he gets back, with Nikola Vucevic still being a big part of this Bulls offense, he's not going to be the type of player that gets 18, 19, 20 shots per game. That's just not who he's going to be as a player, right? Which, Josh Giddey's role is not to be there as a scorer. And I want to be clear here. I'm not saying that Josh Giddey can't score. I'm saying that Josh Giddey's role is not to come in here and be a scorer for the Chicago Bulls. It's to run the offense. Now, that's going to mean that he is going to still score some for sure. But I think the sweet spot for Josh Giddey is probably going to be between 12 and 15 shots per game. I think that's going to be the sweet spot for Josh Giddey, right? But the thing that you have to get there is getting to the free throw line. And that has to be the part that Josh Giddey really has to take pride in. And it seemed like he did last game as well. I do think that there are times where Josh Giddey creates contact early. And by that, I mean, when you're in the paint and in that restricted area, create all the contact you want, right? There are certain times when Josh Giddey is basically one step in from the free throw line where he tries to draw contact and then goes to these weird kind of awkward off-balance floaters. And And he doesn't always get calls in that. I just want to see Josh Giddey kind of eliminate that part. Like if you're going to take a floater, take a floater. Don't try to take the contact to take the floater, because then that's going to throw you off. Take the floater or drive it to the lane and then try to get that contact. And that's going to be the spot where if Josh Giddey can start doing that consistently, that's going to get him to the free throw line more. That's going to extend his range. That's going to extend how teams have to play him as well as putting the opposing teams in foul trouble, right? Josh Giddey's role for this season that I want to see him, especially while Kobe is out, is Josh Giddey has to play so well that it forces them to put their best wing defender on Josh Giddey, because then that's going to take them off Matas Buzelis. Or if they put their best wing defender on Matas Buzelis, Josh Giddey then is going to have the mismatch with a guard that more than likely he's going to be bigger than, and then you take that player to the paint. Again, force them to change the way that they defend you. That's my challenge for Josh Giddey in this season. And like I said, he did a pretty good job at it. In Tuesday's game, he did a pretty damn good job at it. Or Wednesday's game, he did a pretty damn good job at it. And having Trae Young out there as an additional ball handler also created that, because then when they did, press him, they still had a really good ball handler and distributor out there, which Kobe's going to be able to do some of that just in a different way once he's back. But we'll talk about that once we get closer. We got to get through these next 5 games before we really start talking about how Kobe can come back for this team. But that's where I want to see Josh Giddey get to. And I think he has the potential to do it. We've seen it, right? It's just a little slight tweaks. And I compare it to this. For my old Bulls fans, right? Some will remember that when Tom Thibodeau took over this team as head coach, one of the things he first did and established was with Luol Deng, and said, Luol, stop taking those long mid-range shots and just take a step back. Take them as a 3. That way, if it does go in, which is going to be about the same percentage, you get an additional point. Tom Thibodeau literally stopped practice one time when Luol Deng took a long 3 and was like, hold on, that's not what we're going to do. And then you saw Luol Deng have some of his best scoring seasons, right? And that's just a little tweak. He just took an additional step back. And that was before the rise in three-point shooting around the league. Similarly for Josh Giddey, if you're going to go to the floor, go to the floor. If not, go a couple of steps in before drawing that contact. Make the refs have to look at, oh, well, man, we're in the restricted area. They can't be touching them anyway, right? Or take that drive. Don't settle for putting your shoulder into a player when you're still too far out on the perimeter. Take that extra step in. Then you draw and feel that contact, right? He's big enough to do it. He's strong enough to do it. And that's just an added wrinkle that can really make Josh Giddey's game go to the next level, make scoring a lot easier for him. And that's really what I want to see. And that's just in kind of surveying and looking at some things from last season into this year. I think that'll be a big thing for Josh Giddey. So let me know what you guys think on that down below. With that said, let's get into the last topic that I want to get into today. And that is my biggest concern for the Bulls after the Pistons game. And so many people, for people that do have Synergy, right? Which is a great website to kind of break things down. You can go into that and you can narrow everything down by possessions, right? And so I went and looked at every one of the Bulls' possessions that ended in a turnover. And out of the Bulls' 17 turnovers, sloppy passes were some of them, even though if you look at it, the Bulls rank, I have another app as well where you can look at turnovers and you can look at those type of things, and you can look at by what's rated as a bad pass, right? That's what you look at. You want to look at what's rated as a bad pass. And even though the Bulls had a number of turnovers, the bad pass rating on that wasn't as high as what you would think, even with the Bulls having quite a bit of turnovers in that game. And that's fine, right? But there were some bad passes there that the Bulls really got to tighten up. So if they can do that, that helps strengthen the game, right? 6 of the Bulls' 17 turnovers were rated as bad passes. It's not too bad, right? Bad passes is something that you can control, but you want to get that underway. But when you look at the Chicago Bulls and the turnovers that they gave, and this is something that went over to last year as well, the Bulls have to get the turnovers down. Last season, the Utah Jazz averaged the most turnovers in the league, and they averaged 17.2. The Chicago Bulls had 17 turnovers in their first game. You cannot allow that. You can't allow that. And that's where it gets to. You have to, as a team, really buy in to limiting those type of things. And I think the Bulls can do it, right? And we allowed 20 points off turnovers to the Detroit Pistons in Tuesday's game, right? Was it Tuesday? Wednesday's game. My whole thing is off. in Wednesday's game, in the season opener, or say season opener. That's a concern, because especially when you look at the Bulls having a 23-point lead at one time, you want to limit things that you can control. Now, for what it's worth as well, the Bulls had 13 points off turnovers themselves. That was a difference of +7 in favor of the Detroit Pistons, but you don't want to allow that. Now, the Bulls did dominate in second chance points. We had 16 second chance points to only 5 for the Detroit Pistons in that game. Good. The Bulls, while being known as a quick-paced team, the Detroit Pistons actually outscored us in fast break points 19-7. They had 12 more than us in that. So they just got to get that stuff together. And this is just one of the things to watch out for, especially as the Bulls now, they're going to be taking on the Orlando Magic coming into the next game. In the stretch for the Bulls, you're facing some pretty solid defensive teams. And if the Bulls can't get the turnovers together, that's something that will eventually catch up with them. So that's just something I want to watch. The Orlando Magic, a good defensive team. They're going to get turnovers. The Atlanta Hawks, hell, they got Dyson Daniels. He's a takeaway machine by himself, right? They added to kill Alexander Walker. You got to watch out for that in that one. So these next two games, I really want to see how the Bulls deal with turnovers, how many points off turnovers that they give up before I really start worrying about it too much. But that was one of the biggest concerns for me. Physicality wasn't a concern. Defense wasn't really concerned outside of that 30-15 run we gave up. But I think the Bulls played some pretty solid defense throughout the game. It was pretty good. Shooting was solid throughout that game as well. So it's just that part of it that I really want to see get better. And, you know, a lot of the heavy lifting coming off the bench is going to be done by Kevin Huerter and Ayo Dosunmu. But I think those guys are kind of up to the test. I don't think they're always going to combine for 29 points off the bench. But if you can get 20 to 25 points off your bench a game, that's a really good spot for the Bulls to be in, especially with considering that a guy like Trey Jones is going to be in the starting lineup instead of being on your bench, right? And you're missing Zach Collins as well. If you can hover around that area, I think that's going to be really smart for the Bulls to be able to do that. But that's my takeaways. You guys can let me know how you feel down below. Make sure you guys are following us at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullscentralpod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything basketball, for everything Chicago Bulls related. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Breakout Media.